So, my presentation is on the relationship between salt consumption and hypertension. So, just to begin with defining hypertension, it's also known as high blood pressure for those of you who don't know. But it's defined as the force exerted by the blood against the walls of your blood vessels. So, hypertension can lead to severe complications and does increase the risk of heart disease, stroke, and death. So, it is very severe. Hypertension is defined as having a blood pressure higher than 130 over 80. And around 85 million people in the United States have high blood pressure. So, it's pretty common. So, going in more into blood pressure. Um, an ideal blood pressure is seen as 120 over 80. You cannot tell if you have high blood pressure, unfortunately. There are no symptoms that you can just feel. It's not like if you have a cold. So, really, the only way to know if you have blood pressure issues is by going to the doctor. So, it's important to go to the doctors to get checkups so that your blood pressure can be screened and they can monitor it if they need to. They can give you necessary medications or suggest lifestyle changes if your blood pressure is a problem, either low blood pressure or high blood pressure. So, just some risk factors of hypertension. Hypertension increases with age. So, individuals who may have normal blood pressure at the age of 55 can still get it. So, you can't just outgrow high blood pressure. Um, Also, more than two-thirds of US adults over 65 do have hypertension. So, that's a lot of people. Another risk factor is majority of people with hypertension are obese. So obesity does raise blood pressure greatly, and obesity has become more of a growing problem in America over the past couple of years. So it's a huge issue. The last risk factor is dietary factors. So what a person's diet is and what they're eating every day may put them at risk for high blood pressure. And I'm sure most people don't monitor like every food they eat to see if it would give them high blood pressure. Just some United States hypertension statistics. More than 360,000 American deaths, this is from 2013, included high blood pressure as a primary cause. So that is about 1,000 deaths a day, which is crazy. And about every 1 in 3 American adults do have high blood pressure. So that's about 32%. High blood pressure is costly, and the nation spends about $48.6 billion each year on it. This is just a map of the prevalence of hypertension from 2011. And these are all US adults that are 20 and older. So as you can see, the darkest red are states like Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and that is where the most prevalence of hypertension is. And that really didn't surprise me because the South does have more saturated and fried foods. So that's a lot of sodium coming in their bodies. And a majority of the South is obese too. And then you can just see that most of the United States has problems with hypertension. So it is a huge issue. So poor diet can result in a high blood pressure. So foods with sugar and packaged foods all have high blood pressure correlations. So diet too high in salt, calories, saturated and trans fat can also carry an additional risk of having high blood pressure. Also, energy drinks, deli meat, coffee, and alcohol can increase someone's blood pressure. So, a lot of foods that people probably don't even know about and are consuming every day is putting them at risk. This is just an infographic about the effects of excessive sodium on your health and appearance. So it says that 9 out of 10 Americans consume too much sodium. So that's basically everyone. And where does the sodium come from? 65% of it comes from supermarkets, 25% from restaurants, and 10% from other sources like the kitchen. High blood pressure is a leading risk factor for death in women, so it's most prevalent in women. There's about 200,000 female deaths each year, and that should be known that that is nearly 5 times the 42,000 deaths from breast cancer. So more people are dying with high blood pressure than cancer. So there clearly needs to be a more emphasis on high blood pressure. And 77.9 million American adults have high blood pressure. And kids who have a high sodium diet are twice as likely to develop high blood pressure than kids who have a low sodium diet. And we see today that kids are having that high sodium diet and the fast food, which is only going to hurt them in the future. So sodium is an important nutrient and an important electrolyte in your body that helps nerves and muscles function correctly, but excessive amounts of it can greatly hinder your body, causing hypertension. So there's this term, it's called salt sensitivity, and it's a term that's used to describe the huge increase in blood pressure from salt intake. So people that are prone to salt sensitivity are associated with older age, African American cultures, women, and there are other associations. African American people are known to have hypertension early in life rather than Caucasians in America who get them later in life, which is just part of the genetics, and that's just how it is. Salt consumption, the amount of salt intake one has in their diet plays a role in primary hypertension. So salt raises the amount of sodium in your bloodstream, and it reduces the ability for your kidneys to remove that water, which results in the high blood pressure. So the extra fluid and the strain on your blood vessels that lead to the kidney do cause high blood pressure. To continue with that, the recommended daily intake of salt in one day is 2,300 grams, but obviously people aren't really keeping track of that. Unfortunately, the average American consumes more than 3,400 milligrams a day, and 3,400 milligrams a day is equivalent to one restaurant meal. So if people are having 3 meals a day from fast food places, that's probably 10,000 milligrams of salt, which is way too much, and people just aren't educated on it. So the social aspect, just our society, we're constantly being advertised the foods, and these foods are the foods with the high sodium. So McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell, all these fast food convenient places, and the change isn't happening either because fast food chains are scared to make changes to their menus because they're just afraid they're going to lose their customers and that they just won't like the taste of the food. This puts people at an even greater risk in developing hypertension because no one's making that change. So on the other hand, the lower the salt intake is proven to lower someone's blood pressure. So lowering the salt intake can dramatically decrease your blood pressure. So roughly 80% of salt that we eat is in processed foods such as bread, breakfast cereals, prepared meals, etc. And 20% comes from salt that we have while we're cooking. So lowering that can substantially decrease one's blood pressure. So the less salt one consumes, the less strain there is on the heart, the kidneys, the brain, and the arteries. So there is something called the DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And it was made to help people incorporate a diet that has fruits, vegetables, nuts, whole grains, and low-fat milk products, which can significantly lower blood pressure. This diet also helps lowers cholesterol, and it does improve vascular function. So the DASH diet really focuses on eating foods with more fiber, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. And all of these really do help someone's blood pressure. And it is recommended that people eat fish over red meat. So just to emphasize, the DASH diet really emphasized potassium, but potassium is super crucial, and it is a key mineral to the body that the body relies to function. So potassium really lowers people's blood pressure, and it really balances out all the negative effects of salt. So while you could still be eating the salt, low amounts of salt, you can have good sources of potassium such as lean meats, whole grains, beans, nuts, and fruits such as bananas, which you can see here. So what needs to change? Obviously, the amount of salt intake needs to change. So reduction does seem safe and it is cost effective, but that would require public policy, because all that salt that consumers are intaking are from these processed foods, not foods that people make. So many foods that most people eat every single day have the most amount of sodium, which puts them at risk. So they're eating all these processed foods, and it probably has more sodium than something you could cook up. But the good news is change is happening one step at a time. The World Health Organization has already urged people and health professionals and members to take action and reduce population salt intake to decrease the number of these deaths, because the number of deaths is crazy. And in 2015, actually, New York City required chain restaurants to place a high salt warning next to menu items that have over 2,300 grams or more of sodium. So it would just be a salt shaker image like this, and people would know that that probably isn't the best option for them, and they would choose the healthier option, which is a great start. So there's still many debate on salt and hypertension. So there's no clear answer or scientific proof that salt intake causes hypertension. It's not really clear, but some scientists even say that sugar causes high blood pressure, not even salt. And then there's some that argue that the policy interventions to reduce dietary intake of salt are premature and unsafe without studying more about this topic. And actually, reducing salt intake to very low levels could have adverse cardiovascular problems. So you don't really know what you're getting into. It all depends on the person. So how can we prevent hypertension? It's important to maintain a healthy weight, and it's good to start early. Be physically active. Follow a healthy eating plan. So figure out that diet. Eat foods with less sodium, because sodium, although no one knows for sure, sodium does cause high blood pressure. So that needs to be monitored. And of course, taking your prescribed medications that you have been directed to. And just some tips to reduce salt. Buying the fresh, plain, frozen, canned vegetables with no salt is the way to go. Using fresh poultry rather than the canned or processed foods is so much better. Using herbs, spices, and salt-free seasoning blends in cooking and at the table are good. Cooking your rice and pasta without salt and cutting back on flavored pastas and cereals, which are the things that usually have the most added salt. And choosing convenience food may seem like the quicker option, but you should choose foods that are low in sodium. So just cutting back on all the frozen pizzas and dinners and salad dressings and soups, those do have a lot of sodium. And whenever there's availability of low sodium versions of things, it should be taken advantage of. Also, it's important to read food labels too because they clearly say the milligrams of sodium, which could really help you out.